Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Animal Connections from Coast to Coast. I'm Mary Beth, and I'm representing the East Coast. I'm here with Denise.
Hey, I'm Denise. I'm representing the West Coast from Portland, Oregon, and I'm an animal communicator, intuitive, and teacher. So I specialize in helping people develop relationships with their pets by interpreting messages from them. I also love teaching other people how to do animal communication so people can talk to their pets themselves.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And like I said, I'm from East Coast. I'm from North Carolina, and I'm a physio, body worker, healer, communicator, and teacher. My passion is really just holistic wellness, and for both humans and their animals, because and part of that I really feel is being able to understand our animals, and so that's what really makes me fall in love with animal communication. Is the key is being able to understand each other. So we thought today, for today's edition, we would kind of dive into what to expect when you're having an animal communication. What do you think, Denise? Sound good?
Absolutely. And it's different with every animal communicator. So you could have one session with someone, you could have then a session with one of us, and it might look a little bit different. So we want to talk about, if you are interested, these are just some of the things that might come up.
Exactly. And I think you're exactly right that it's going to happen differently between whether you have a reading with Denise, whether you have a reading with myself, or when you have a reading with somebody else. And the other thing is important is that not every reading, even if for Denise and myself, will be the same. Even with the exact same animal, can be a little bit different. So today we're just going to talk about generalized because I know animal communication in and of itself may be something of an interesting and kind of a unique topic for many of you, and you may be wondering, okay, what in the world happens during a session? So we're hoping to answer those questions today. So Denise, why don't you kick things off? What do you usually ask for when people first are even thinking about an animal communication and connect with you?
Well, I usually just connect with a picture. So the first question I get is, does the animal need to be there? Um, do we want to do it in person? And it works just the same having a picture as actually seeing the animal. So that's the first thing. But I also always tell people to let the animal know that I'm going to be talking to them and give them permission. And that seems kind of like it's understood, but I've had times where an animal will kind of be like, oh, what's going on? And there's other times where they will answer the person's questions before I even ask them. So it just gives the animal a way to prepare, let them know what's going on, and also a chance for the person to tell them what the questions are going to be. So often the animal kind of knows already, and so they're trying to communicate. They just don't have the words to use. Do you do something like that, Mary Beth?
Exactly. And I always ask for just a picture and a name. Because I don't really want a whole lot of information from the caregiver, but I agree with you. Is just the caregiver to have a slight conversation with their animal, or at least to let their animal know. Because what I personally like to do is connect with the animal before the reading as well, just to kind of have our own little kind of meet and greet, if you will. And sometimes I will get a lot of information and a lot of answers that the caregiver may have, or to the questions that the caregiver may have. But that's why I just like a picture and the name, because that gives me a chance to connect with them beforehand. Because I think you're exactly right. Many times people contact us because there is a burning question. Sometimes there is an issue, such as an illness, lost pet, change in environment, change in the family status, some sort of precipitating issue that the caregiver is particularly concerned of. Sometimes people are just curious and they're like, you know what? I just want to know about my animal. I've had readings kind of hitting all of those categories. I've also had a lot of readings with people with rescue animals or horses that they don't know the background. So it always kind of has a burning kind of question in the caregiver's mind. And the animals pretty much, I want to say 10 out of 10, but I'll say 9 times out of 10 are already aware of that. And so they use a little bit of that initial meet and greet that I have with them before the meeting to kind of let me know what some of those concerns are.
Well, that's one thing I tell the people to tell their animal their questions, but I don't want to know too much. So I always start out by letting the animal speak first. If I know too much, it's a little more difficult to know that I'm connecting, to know what they're bringing up as opposed to what I already know about them. So I really like to let the animal kind of lead the conversation. But unlike you, I try not to connect ahead of time. I often start getting information beforehand when I'm meditating, but I like to have the person there so that I'm just saying what I'm getting when I'm getting it. Otherwise, I'm afraid I think about it too much or overanalyze it. So I like to have the person there. Also, when I'm doing it, as they're giving me information, I like to ask questions about it. So if they're telling me something, I can say, "Is this what you mean?" I can say, I think this is what you're saying. Is that correct? And that feels a little different to me if the person's not there because because really I want to be able to interpret the message to them exactly as I'm getting it. So that's one example of how our styles might be a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. For me, I just talk a lot. I mean, I'm a Leo. So I'm a Leo, I'm an extrovert, and I like to talk. And I find sometimes the caregiver also likes to talk, or there's a certain level of nervousness, especially when we have the caregiver involved. So that kind of animal speaking first is just a quiet, really quiet time to me connect for me to connect. And I agree with you. There's times that I'll get symbols, or I'll get some things that do not make sense, and I just kind of jot it down. It's just like, okay, so and so was talking about this, and that's kind of when I use that information to talk with the caregiver when the caregiver is involved. I kind of just honor the animal and write down what they have to say and then bring that to the table. Now, that's not to say that the animal has, it is quiet during the reading. There's still a lot of things that come up, and especially when the caregivers have questions, I kind of let them know what came up that be kind of during the pre session, and then we dive into kind of the three-way conversation. So,
Mhm.
and the animal always has a lot to say during that
Yes.
session too, and then the caregivers, that's when I'll ask questions.
I think there is a misconception too about how the information might come through. And for example, I mean, someone might think that we sit down to have a conversation and the animal says, "Oh, the other day you were doing this thing and I was doing that and you put your keys over here." And it's not that detailed. So
Right.
we are getting images, we're getting pictures, and we're trying to interpret that. Sometimes there is something that's very specific, but I would say for me, it's more like a sentence, maybe, or a few words. I don't get a whole story. So, so we're not just getting a download from the animal and just telling you all of all of these things. For me, it's very interactive. We're going back and forth trying to understand what the information is.
Great point. Great point. And you're exactly right. Thank you for bringing that up. That, yeah, it's not when I use the word conversation, or when, we talk about having conversation, it's not this whole wordy conversation. A lot of times we can pick up on symbols that we've talked about in previous videos. Um, I find, especially in the kind of in the beginning part, a lot of the things that come up are things that the animal uses to validate, like little things. Like, for example, I think you mentioned broccoli, so kind of that sort of little things that may come up during the and then we're able to kind of validate, because validation, I think, is really huge for us as well, and as well for the caregiver. And it's not some parlor trick. We're not using that to, kind of, okay, yeah, but we got this. It's more just to verify that we're making that connection with the animal.
I definitely do the same thing. And that is because I want to make sure that I'm connecting to the right animal,
Right.
that I do have a connection. As an animal communicator, I want to do this ethically. So if I get a no and they say I don't think that's my animal, we want to figure out why, or maybe I'm connecting to a different animal. If I'm not connecting to an animal and someone wants to discontinue the session, I will refund their money. Um, no issues with that because there can be things that come up. But I do, as you say, that it's really important at the beginning to make sure that we have established this connection. And so I always ask first for the animal to show me something about their personality, something that will help me confirm that to their person that I'm connecting. And usually they'll tell me or show me something that is meaningful to the person
Yeah.
so they can say yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just something that, yeah. And I think that's really important too, what you mentioned about sometimes there may not be a connection. I mean, we hope there's a connection and we definitely want to connect with as many animals as we can. But there's a couple of things that could happen. One is our energies just may not connect with each other, us and the animals, or the animal may just not feel comfortable, or there can just be any number of things that could happen. And it is really important for us to know that right from the get go and let the caregiver know, because I agree 100% with you is that this is not just something some parlor trick or something that we want to go ahead and make up for, because that's not honoring the animal and that's not honoring the person. And like we mentioned at the beginning, many times there's issues that come up is why caregivers or their people come to us. And if we're not able to recognize that connection right from the beginning, we're not doing them any service. So I 100% agree with you that if there is not that connection, we'll let them know.
Mhm.
And Denise and I have already kind of talked that, hey, you know what, I'm a little too, you know I don't know, I'm not connecting with this animal, I would refer them to Denise, and kind of vice versa, or kind of refer them somewhere else.
And I think any animal communicator would do that. It's kind of understood that some people might not be an energetic fit to an animal. And so there's plenty of us out there, and I feel like it's kind of a community.
Yes.
I will say that I've had this happen where I it did not appear that I was connecting to the animal. The client kept saying, no, that's not them. And so we kind of said, okay, well, let's move on. Let's talk to your other dog. And it turns out that that's who I was connecting to. So I find that that happens most often when there's multiple animals in a household, but that's something that does come up and something to explore. In that case, I was glad we didn't just end the session because eventually we figured out what it was. So there are lots of different scenarios and things that could come up.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's one thing, is just to kind of understand is that we will let you know. We will let you know what we're feeling. And I think the biggest thing is that I want the person as well as the animal to just feel comfortable, to just feel like they're in a safe space. I even so much as I ask people at the very beginning how they feel about an opening prayer or an opening meditation, whatever they feel comfortable. I have had people who just did not feel comfortable, did not want to do, that opening prayer. And so we just did a quick breath. So that's the other thing that's important for me, is that I can be pretty woo, but I don't expect you to be. I definitely want to do what feels safe for you and feels normal for you. And so I think that's kind of the other reason why I do a full pre-meditation is, I want the caregiver to do what's right with for them.
That's really interesting because that's not something that I do with my clients. So I love that you do that together. I often find that I just want to get started. So I've done my meditation, and sometimes the information starts coming through, and I'll get into a session and I'll just want to start going. I do try to explain a little bit about the
Yes.
process, kind of give some information before we get started. But I love when there's just so much information that I just can keep going and going. One other thing is that with my sessions, I try to leave the client with some action that they can take, especially if they've contacted me because um, of a behavioral issue or their animal seems upset, something like that. So sometimes part of the session is coming up with a plan, figuring out um, how you can train them. I learn a lot from all of the clients that I work with, and I study. I try to keep up with things that are going on in the animal community in terms of training, things like that. So sometimes it's not all just the communication. Part of it is
Yes.
our discussion, thinking about options. I might have some suggestions and they can say, well, I've already tried that. So trying to come up with a plan of action as well.
Yeah, that's very key. Because yeah, I mean, there's really not a whole lot more to add to that one. I think you nailed the nail on the head. Is that plan of action? We're able to kind of part of coming to the resolution is figuring out, okay, this is the issue. This is from both sides, and what are we going to do about it? And I found that definitely from a background of even I've incorporated even some physical therapy into some of the readings or just some stretching recommendations or I try not to do a whole lot of that, because again, I'm not a vet. And if the people are coming to me for animal communication, we'll talk about this. But like there's usually a lot of really great body workers in the area, and so we'll kind of talk about different things like that. And I've also it's been interesting because for a while there a lot of animals were coming in to talk about their caregiver, and so it was almost turning into a coaching session with their caregiver. um so like you said, it's just kind of finding the solution and just seeing some active points that they can walk away from so that they can the problem can, I won't necessarily say completely solved, but as solved as possible.
I think people appreciate having something that they can do, having an action they can take, rather than just saying, okay, well, we know the dog is upset about XYZ. Yeah, that doesn't, maybe you
That's
know, but it doesn't help if there's nothing you can do about it. I I also have had readings where what came up was actually about the person. And sometimes I'm not sure if it's coming from the animal or if I'm tuning into the person as well. But I think a lot of times that's the animal's way of saying they want to address this thing. Um, and so that can go either way. Sometimes people are open to that. Sometimes it's harder to hear because it's easier for them to focus on the animals. But that's just something to be aware of, that we might touch on some of your issues that we just know of because of the animal, because whatever we're doing as people, it affects our animals. We're all in the same energy, and sometimes the animals or their pets and their people will have the same issues at the same time. I had a client who said she had kidney stones and the dog got kidney stones at exactly the same time, and that totally makes sense
yes.
because we're so in sync. We're breathing the same air, living in the same environment. And so sometimes by having this show up in the animal, they're actually saying, you need to take care of this in you too.
Right, exactly. Oh, 100% our animals can be mirrors. Both physical problems, emotional problems. And I think many times our animals choose us or we choose each other so that we can heal together. I mean, there's so that there can be issues that are being healed or that we're being able to see our animals are trying to show us in ourselves so that yeah, like I said, we can heal each other and heal from them. So yeah, I love that. So people make an appointment, they send the picture. We talked about kind of what to expect. But I'd love to kind of dive into what we expect, because that has been a question that I've actually been asked before, is what do we expect from somebody? And the big thing I will kind of start off by saying is that sometimes we get symbols, sometimes we get information that may not make sense at the moment, but for whatever reason, this is what's coming up. Doesn't don't be quick to just throw that away, is what I invite the caregivers to, hold on to that. Even at the end of the session, if we still haven't been able to figure out this one issue, it may make sense later. It may either make sense later or it may come up later. So don't be quick just to disregard things. I'll give a quick example of a reading that was done for me on my dog Tardis. I was in a class, an animal communication class, and my partner asked about allergies. And I was like, no, my dog does not have any allergies. I mean, he likes to lick his paws, but there's no allergies. Well, the next week, he started having ear issues. We went to the vet and he said, yep, it's allergies. At the time, I was not able to validate it, but a week later I was. So that's just what I encourage people, is just to have an open mind.
That is so true about things coming up later. I've had people come back to me and say, oh, I figured out what you were talking about. I figured out what this thing was. And sometimes you don't. You might not know. For me, it's really important that people come with an open mind. Because if someone comes to me and says, oh, I don't really believe in animal communication, but I've tried everything else and I don't know what to do, that is kind of closing the door a little bit. And animal communication isn't for everyone. You know, people have different beliefs, and I don't always know how it works. I don't know why, why I see an image of broccoli when I talk to this dog, so I can get that it doesn't make sense to everyone. So I ask that if you are coming to a session, you come with an open mind and know that anything is possible, and also try and just be open to exploring what things could mean. So sometimes people expect it to be literal, and it's not always. They could be showing us a symbol that represents a thought or an idea. And so I just ask people to work with me in that process.
Yeah, exactly. Open mind is key. And along with that, I believe intent is key. You don't have to believe in it. Like I said, I'm 10 out of 10 woo. I'm definitely swimming in the Kool-Aid, not just drinking in it. But I know not everybody else is. And that's okay. You can be 1 out of 10 woo and still benefit from an animal communication reading. We don't expect you to walk away from here being not skeptical, or we don't expect people to have a little bit of skeptic is, how do you say that word,
Skepticism. I
thank
know
you.
what you mean.
Thank you. However, I don't know, I'm getting tongue tied, but a little bit of that word is okay. And but as long as the door stays open, just being intent, because if you're coming, oh nope, you're crazy, why are you even contacting us? Because you're not only shutting the door from our communication, you're also shutting the door from the animal. You're telling the animal, this is not safe. This is stupid, or this is, whatever word you want to use. That intent, even if it's a small, okay, let's just see what happens, that's enough. That is okay for me, is just that little bit, okay, let's try it. Because again, you're also giving that permission to the animal when you say even just that little bit of an inch.
Even if you, just have that little bit of, I don't know about this, the animal can pick up on that. And so they may say, oh, I'm going to follow what my mom or dad says. And so then they may be less likely to talk to us.
Exactly. Exactly. Less likely. They're not going to feel safe. They feel like, there's no point. And I also think even if the animal, you know, how we'll see if this makes sense to some of you, but I also believe the animal can initiate some of this. Like I believe our animals communicate with us. And they have even may have helped kind of put that thought in your mind, especially you people who are completely skeptical. I feel like even if that animal is like, nope, let's try this. Let's try this, mom. You're not listening to me. Let's try this. And so skeptical Jane is on there, all right, whatever. I still don't think it's going to be completely effective because even if that animal really wants to communicate and really wants to be heard, that person's ears are closed. They're not going to be hearing anything. So again, slightly open mind, just enough just to be open for the animal. Even if you walk away with just a little bit or you come into the room with just, okay, let's see what happens. I don't believe you. You're crazy, but let's just see what happens. That's at least enough so that that animal is able to be heard. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. And yes, maybe it's because the animal has something they want to say. It's the animal's wish that you listen. So we can always honor the animal. And you also can always contact us before a reading or before scheduling. If you have questions, I love answering questions. I love talking about what we do. This is fun for us.
Yes.
So you can always reach out.
Just don't give us too much information.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just
Don't
one
tell
thing
me
I ask.
the
I
animal's
don't
whole
want to
life
be
story.
swayed. I don't want to be there's a better word for that, but I don't want to be tunnel vision. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that can happen if we know too much about the animal. But I would encourage everyone. We love getting questions. If you can put something in the comments or reach out to us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love that. I think that would be, especially for people who may even be curious or even just want just a little bit of a taste. I know Denise offers 30-minute, we have short, we prefer an hour. Most of what I offer is an hour reading just because it takes a little bit of time to kind of dive in and to have a full conversation. But there are 30-minute options that people are able to sign in for if you wanted to just a taste.
Yeah, I do have 30 minutes. I also offer an option for a single question in which the client isn't present, but I can just tune into the animal and get an answer to a question. You don't necessarily get the feedback then. So I can't validate that I'm connecting with them, but that's a good option if finances are an issue. 30 minutes, we have enough time to talk to one animal and ask a couple questions, and then an hour you can really go in depth. Or I can cover usually two and possibly three animals if we have an hour.
Right.
So there are lots of different options.
Yeah, exactly. And some just housekeeping stuff. If you're curious, both of us, you can find our information below. You just kind of go into our websites. There's a place you can schedule. If it doesn't make sense, please feel free. Or if you want to talk about a 15-minute option with either one of us, a single question or a 30-minute option, feel free to email us. And again, we just ask for a picture. And pretty much what I do, mostly Zoom. I've just kind of found a lot of my clients have been either overseas or on the West Coast. I have had some local clients and I will go to their house, but with COVID, I find that most of the times it's just easier to do a Zoom call. And actually, some of my caregivers have preferred Zoom calls, but on a case by case, local, I will travel.
Right. And I primarily do Zoom as well, or you can request just a phone call if you don't want to get on the computer. I have done a few in-person sessions, but I find that they can be, there's a lot more talking. I feel like the animal doesn't get as much attention because we're there, the person is offering me water or coffee and we're, talking about other things. So I actually feel like doing the Zoom, it's more focused and we can give the animal more attention and more time. So it doesn't to me, it doesn't add value by doing it in person. So, but again, there's lots of flexible options. So please just reach out if there's something that
Yes.
works best for you.
And before I let you go, I just kind of felt one quick question that came in that I wanted to talk about. You guys may have a specific animal that you want to connect with, but then you may feel like, okay, can other animals come in, or can other maybe even beings come in, such as like mediumship, or I we'll kind of talk about that another time, but I wanted to answer if multiple animals. And for me, my experience is yes. We try to stick with the animal that you are specifically contacting us about. But especially for the hour readings, like Denise mentioned, we could have other animals that come in. Um, I've had even animals from people's childhoods kind of come in. So we do stick with the animal that you were requesting, but it is possible to have other animals come in.
Mm. Yes, definitely. So we look forward to hearing from you. We'd love to talk to your animals.
Yes, yep. You will find our information posted below, and I will put it in the comments section as well as in the description section. So until next time, y'all be safe out there.
Thanks.